When I remember Levan, I think of all of the many positive things that he brought to Georgia, to the United States, and to my life personally. He was a remarkable individual, first and foremost because of his human qualities. This is a man who was a gentleman in a time when people shout at each other and engage in all kinds of subterfuges to undermine each other. Levan was quite the contrary. He was always upfront, realistic, but gentlemanly, kind, and thoughtful. I think of him because he was a remarkable diplomat. And this was at a time when Georgia badly needed remarkable diplomats. And finally, I think about Levan because he was a great strategist, and I like strategists. Levan was one of these people who, without much pushing or encouragement, could look 15, 20, 25, 50 years in the future. He could express and describe different kinds of alternative futures for Georgia, for the region, for Eurasia, for Russia, for the Western world, in ways that made a great deal of sense. He could chart in his imagination the pathways into those worlds and the kind of things that we should be paying attention to that might be along those pathways. All of this made him a remarkable asset. I personally miss him terribly because he was a very, very good and deep friend. But Georgia still misses him because he's the kind of diplomat and the kind of human being that appears once a century. And the legacy that he leaves behind, one hopes, is that example which should inspire and propel younger people into the worlds that he inhabited. Georgia will be infinitely richer as a result.
We've had a wonderful meeting here in memory of Levan Mikeladze, and I must say, as someone who knew Ambassador Mikeladze, I have to think back with great fondness at his combination of, he was a kind of practical dreamer. He was strong on both sides. He was hard-headed and realistic. On the other hand, he was an optimist, and he saw potential and possibilities, always. Now, that was a theme here because everyone acknowledged that this is a moment at which Europe, for well-known reasons, is not in a particularly dynamic mood, especially with regard to the Caucasus, and that the United States is still in the process of reorganizing itself under a new administration. And so this led some to question, well, is anything going to happen right now? And the conclusion, almost universal in the gathering, was yes, it can happen. That Georgia's history, recent history, proves that a small country can take a serious role in the world. And everyone was encouraging Georgia, on the basis of recent progress and successes, to take a more dynamic role diplomatically as a convener, bringing people together. And also there was a strong feeling that Georgia, being in the middle of the route from Europe to China or to India, that Georgia is an ideal place to convene end users of the new continental transport networks. End users gathering in Tbilisi, that would be a dream, and it would be good for business and good for security.
In this memorable day, when we remember the birthday of our dear friend Levan Mikeladze, I wish to extend my warmest feelings and my fondest memory to Levan's family. Levan Mikeladze, or better, Ambassador Mikeladze, was a bright person with a very warm personality. He was a subtle intellectual with a high degree of patriotic awareness. He was highly educated with a deep sense of responsibility for his country, Georgia, which he loved fondly in the best patriotic sense. We miss this gentleman who in the diplomatic arena would pass all his messages in a discreet but persistent way, never to harm the cause of his country under any circumstances.
So I will tell you now something about my very, very close friend, Levan Mikeladze, whom I had the pleasure to work with for almost 5 years while he was ambassador to Austria. And at the same time, I was working in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Georgia, and I was also at the same time ambassador of Austria to Georgia. And we were all happy when we heard that the Georgian government had decided to send a new ambassador to Austria. But as we had so many problems in the past, I was dispatched to Georgia to meet the new ambassador before actually we would have given the agrément. So I went to Georgia for the first time, and before actually I could ask for an official meeting with Levan Mikeladze, I met him by chance already in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this was a rather short meeting, and talking to friends, international friends I had in Georgia. Of course, I wanted to get some information on Levan before. And everyone told me, oh, you're very lucky to get Levan as an ambassador, because he really is an excellent personality, professionally as well as personally. And he comes from one of the best Georgian families. So for the average public, be it Georgian or Austrian, of course, hearing that someone comes from the best Georgian families would be really a good indication, and everyone would love this. Come now to the professional experience I had with Levan. We might divide this maybe into two parts. First in the bilateral part, but also on the multinational forum we cooperated. Bilaterally, we had many visits while Levan was still in Austria, and also our, let's say, database, like basis of our contractual relations was increased, trade was increasing, and slowly we started also preparation for later on Georgia becoming one of the focal points of the Austrian development cooperation. So I could say that our professional kind of duty of working together really developed in a friendship, a real friendship that also, unfortunately, after the demise of Levan, is still continuing today. If we would have Levan still today among ourselves, I think destiny would have foreseen for him quite more important jobs that he actually had as ambassador.
I'm delighted that we had an opportunity, I had the opportunity today to be at this conference to honor the memory of Ambassador Levan Mikeladze. I have known him ever since I arrived in Georgia in 1998, and he always impressed me as honest, intelligent, a person of great integrity, great moral standing, who was a real, true Georgian patriot. And when he was ambassador here, I was already, in retirement, but I very frequently met with him, and I always found him just to be just a superb diplomat and a wonderful person. And there's also something else that always impressed me, and that was his willingness to speak truth to power. He was not in this business, for personal gain or to become, great prestige conscious. He was in it because he believed in Georgia, and he believed, in democracy. He believed, that Georgia, should be anchored in the West. And he was a very principled, wonderful person, and I regard it as a real privilege to have known him.
Well, I might say a few words about my first meeting with Levan. He was presenting his copies of his credentials to the Deputy Secretary of State, and that leads to his presenting his credentials to the President. And I met a man who embodied all the gentlemanly qualities that I aspire to, often fail, but I could tell immediately that he had qualities of humility, intellect, dignity, good carriage, And I couldn't imagine a better representative for the nation of Georgia. And now it's on the anniversary of his 60th birthday. In Asia, 60 was considered 5 cycles. And it's considered quite propitious. And I would give anything if we had Levan here today to enjoy in front of us his 5th cycle. You know, I know that we could use his dignity, his skill, his intellect these days. Georgia's in the middle of a very difficult area. We've got the difficulties of the Russian Federation as the United States and Russia try to find a way to a somewhat more congenial relationship. Turkey is heavily involved in Syria, and that has its own implications for Georgia. So all in all, we need the wisdom of Levan in these days more than any other time.
როგორ შეიძლება რომ ისევ ამაზე უკან წავიდეთ, ხა ომის მაგივრად პრობლემა ისევ გადაუწყვეტელია. თუმცა იმაში გენოციდი იყო. იმაში იყო გენოციდი რა უნდა და ხმარავენ არ უნდა მიყოს. ბოლომდე უნდა. ახლა იზენდენ. ჩვენ მოვიდეთ ეს აი დღე ამ უნდა გესვა.
Mm-hmm.